This conference will now be recorded.
Everyone, I hope you've been doing well. Thank you for taking some time out this week to join us. This is the, I forget what month it is, but I think we're in May now. May Budget Committee meeting. I'll go ahead and call this to order. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes as they've been presented to you?
Move the approval.
Thank you. If there are none, we'll just go ahead and approve those as presented. We'll move on to item 3, a new business A. There's been some, we had some previous discussion about the Budget Committee and Audit Committee being two separate entities. As we track moving forward, I wanted to open up some discussion and feel from the group about the permanent combining of these two committees to become a Budget and Audit Committee. Being that some of our work has been overlapping and not wanting to just create additional committees at the council level and amongst the citizenry, I think that it's plausible for us to combine these and move forward into the next year with those being combined. But I'd like to open that up to discussion amongst the group. I don't see anybody on my video talking. Go ahead, Doug.
Would we formulate separate meetings, or would we meet jointly from the standpoint of budget and audit and adjourning one and entering into another? How would that look?
My thought is that they would share the same agenda. They would share the same meeting times. And so we would just take on the continue to proceed with the duties that we've taken on from the state, that the state's asked us to do for this fiscal year. And we just roll those into the next fiscal year. So nothing would really change as far as procedurally. I think there would need to be some discussion at the council level on potentially amending the resolution or the ordinance that we passed establishing the Budget Committee and its inclusion of an Audit Committee moving forward. Those duties that we've laid out for this year. Mayor, I see you nodding. Do you have any input on that?
I think that's exactly the easiest path. From the comptroller standpoint, what they told us was to establish an audit committee. They didn't say a budget committee, so we were at one piece of it. I think just adding the audit component to the committee would be the easiest thing to do.
Hey, Paul, I think one of the things we talked about in the past was just if there wasn't a separate audit committee, then having some professionals that are in that field. If we combine them, I mean, not to make this thing huge and keep adding people, but do we see the need to add someone in that realm of expertise if we were to combine it?
Yeah, what I think ends up, I think as we move to adding and rolling off members into the future, that gives us an opportunity to add on members with accounting backgrounds to give us a more diverse group of people on this committee moving forward. I don't know if we continue to add people to this committee if it just gets too large to handle. I think we're with 7 people. I feel like we're at a good balancing point where we have enough that can attend and move business forward and have a quorum.
We don't want to end up with a committee larger than the council.
Yeah. So I think, one of the things that we're going to have to discuss, or the mayor's going to have to consider, is we establish terms when we pass the ordinance at the council level for these positions, and we need to assign who those. I know some of you have had we've had some discussion early on when you were asked to serve on this committee on your tenure on the committee and how long you could serve on it, and so we need to align those with the term limits and the roll-off that we've established via the ordinance, and we'll have the opportunity for that here in the coming year to add another member. Doug, being our informal parliamentarian, do you think we should? I would present a motion to permanently combine these moving forward and to begin drafting language to combine these two moving on into future fiscal years.
Mr. Chair, I think that would be in order. I think that would be in order to present to the council coming from this committee as a recommendation. So yes, I think that would be in order.
Okay. So I would move that we recommend the permanent combination of the budget committee and audit committee as it's currently performing its duties with this group, and we'll draft additional language into the budget ordinance to extend the audit committee capacity to the budget committee.
So, Mr. Chair, just for clarification, do we want that those modifications and additions created and brought to this group for review before it goes to council?
Yeah, so we'll do that over the coming month, and in our June meeting, I think it would be a good time to go ahead and bring that before this group for review and potential recommendation to the council.
Okay.
So do we need, I guess the point is we're going to move forward with this, at least drafting the language. Doug, do we need a vote to move forward on that, or I'll just draft it up?
I think you could draft it, and then once it's drafted to present, I think at that point it would be a motion to accept as presented. I would also yield to Councilman Brooks for his expertise in this area as well.
I'm willing to help in any way I need to. And Paul, we can get together on that language, okay?
All right. So we'll proceed. We'll get together and work on the language on modifying the ordinance and the combination of these two duties into one committee, and present that back to the budget committee in our next meeting.
So is that
okay. I look forward to it.
What's that? I'm sorry.
Is that a withdrawal of your motion then?
That's a withdrawal of the motion.
Yeah, don't need a motion.
Okay. So we're moving on to item 3B, the hiring of an internal auditor. Mayor, would you like to present that?
So with the changes that we're having in our finance department, it opens up an opportunity for personnel wise and for salary wise to hire an internal auditor. I don't know if you've gotten the job description. We're working on the job description as far as salary ranges and duties, and so that will be one of the few exceptions of our hiring freeze. Once we get that together, we'll publish that and have an internal auditor that will set their own agenda, do our internal audits, and then also work on some compliance pieces for us so we can be proactive, and then we can also come back and audit the things that we've done and find better ways to do them and make sure that we're doing things the correct way. I think Alex is on the meeting. He could tell us kind of where we are in the process of that job description.
Hello. Yes, sir. I believe it is completed, and I sent it to Sandy to send out. So I hope that everyone has it in front of them. And it hasn't been posted yet, but I imagine that'll be very soon. Thank you.
So for the group, if you recall, there were a lot of early discussion amongst this group on the establishment of this position. I think it's something that we identified early on as a necessary position, one that had been around a number of years ago and had been phased out previously, and it's something that I think we can identify that is needed. I think something we're going to have to work out, especially back on our previous point, is how this position interfaces with the audit committee. We've had some preliminary discussion about that, but the way that I would see that is that as they prepare their audit plan for the year, they would bring that audit plan to this committee or the audit committee, and have that plan reviewed and approved and pushed forward towards the city council for their review and approval as well. And in addition to that, they would work along with the audit committee in monitoring management and helping management deal with issues that come out of our annual audit. So that they would effectively serve as this financial advisor that we've had some discussion about to the audit committee as well. So they could give us some financial insight to Councilman Pretty's previous point.
And also, if I may, Mr. Chairman, one change we made to the previous position of the internal auditor, we beefed it up a little bit to where they can be more involved in the management stuff. And we're greatly seeking that input and that advice. Thank you.
Any questions for Alex or Andrew?
Hey, Paul, just as a refresher, is this individual someone who we as a budget and audit committee will recommend to city council, or is this someone who will be who we won't be involved in the hiring process, so to speak?
Yeah, so the way that this is structured presently is that this would be a city employee that would be hired within the finance department. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions about that? I just wanted to
I had a quick question, if I may. Will the process include this position being open to the public, or how will we publicize the?
Yeah, it'll be just like every other job posting. So we don't have any postings right now because we're on a hiring freeze. But once we finalize the job description, it'll be published publicly, if I can get those words out. And so then we'll go through that process of hiring. So we'll open that up to anyone who wants to apply.
Right. And Mayor, when would that person be scheduled to come on board?
As soon as we can get it published and get enough time for him to get in. Yeah.
So I guess we're kind of looking at the beginning, maybe in July, kind of getting them started and the first of the fiscal year.
I think it's probably pretty aggressive by the time we get it published and get interviews, probably mid-July, maybe probably at the latest August. But yeah, our goal is mid-July.
Okay.
All right.
Hey, Mayor Carter, can you just speak to just like, just a brief synopsis of how you envision this position in conjunction with your office, our current financial office, and the council? Like, I'm just reading it, it's like it's in the capacity under the direction of you. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it'll be just like, our finance and budget director now. So they will make reports to council. Obviously, they're going to seek input from areas when they make the audit plan on where to look and what processes to improve. They'll also be working with purchasing department, any contracts, to make sure that we're doing everything in the compliant manner. So they'll be reporting to their direct report to my office, but they'll also be making reports to the council, making reports to the audit and budget committee on what their progress is, what their plan is, and getting input from all those bodies from the committees and from my office on what needs to be looked at and how the processes can be improved.
Mayor, what is the salary?
We're, I think, looking at 75.
Okay.
That puts it at a director level salary.
Any other questions on that? So as we proceed down this path, I think that give us a chance to look at how this, again, how this position interfaces with this group moving forward. I'm going to go ahead and move on, if I can get my screens in order here, to old business item 4A, discussion about the impact of the coronavirus on our expenses and revenues. I'm going to turn it over to Bobby Arnold.
Thank you, Paul. It's good to see everybody. I distributed some documents via email, I think kind of midday yesterday. I hope everybody has received those. They can kind of serve as a foundation for most of the agenda items under old business. Mr. Chairman, I was a little unclear on exactly how you wanted to proceed through this. I can speak to generally the documents that I distributed and see what questions there may be. Is that how you would like to proceed? Or?
Yes, I think what I'd like to have is, previously we had had some preliminary discussion, and I would maintain the comments that we had in our last meeting about the moving target that this virus has provided on us estimating revenues for not only this fiscal year, but for next year. We've done some more work, and it seems that picture is, at least from the state level, is being presented as a little bit more rosy than it was previously. And so that gives us some hope. But with that being said, there still are some significant shortfalls that we will be experiencing. And Bobby, I was hoping that I've got this revenue comparison worksheet I could send to the group. It has some estimations from.
Yeah, I can speak to, excuse me, I'm sorry. I didn't understand we were going to send that detail. I could have distributed that. I'm prepared to kind of speak to the revenue impact, particularly in the general fund, if you'd like for me to, and can highlight some particular accounts.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, and you're absolutely correct, Paul. We continue to work each day in what is a very fluid situation, and we'll continue to rely on the best source of information as far as projections that we can get. What's interesting about this is the moving environment, the fluid environment that you described. It creates a situation where some of these variances are really interesting when you look at them from year to year. But if it's okay, I'll just kind of run through maybe most of the broad revenue categories for the general fund and speak to some specific accounts that I think are most highly impacted by the current situation. Is that okay?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So if you look at current year tax revenues for the city, if you look back into 2019 to 2020, we actually had a decrease in FY20 in property tax revenues. This is mainly driven by the situation with West Tennessee Healthcare. Looking forward to FY21, we have a nominal increase in property tax collections projected. This is driven primarily by an increased assessed valuation. If you look at delinquent prior year tax collections, with Chancery Court being closed recently due to the COVID-19 situation, actually our prior tax year collections for this year are projected to be down from where they were in FY19. And then you look ahead to FY21, it's actually showing an increase from 20 because of the current situation, but a decrease from the levels of FY19. If tax equivalent payments as a broad category, right now are showing reflecting a 4% decrease from the current year. Again, this is primarily driven by the situation with the local healthcare system and the anticipated tax equivalent payment that we receive from the health system. I know local sales tax is one of the revenue sources that we've been monitoring very closely and concerned with. Our FY19 local sales tax in total, around these numbers a little bit, was $20.2 million. We're forecasting our FY20 local sales tax revenues to be down by about 5.5% compared to 2019, totaling about $19.1 million. And looking ahead to FY21, we're projecting local sales tax revenues to have about another roughly 10% decrease over FY20 levels, that total being $17.4 million. So if you compare FY21, what's projected now, to a full year of FY19, that's about a 14% increase, 14% decrease in local sales tax revenues. Business tax is another revenue source that we're monitoring very closely. The state has extended the payment date for business taxes this year due to the COVID-19 situation. As a result of that, business tax this year is compared to 19 is down about $400,000. And if you compare next year's projection for business tax, which is actually showing an increase over this year, right? Which is a little odd because of the payment extension that's been allowed by the state this year. But business taxes for next year are projected to be about 8% below FY19 levels. Hotel-Motel Tax, another revenue source that's clearly impacted by the current pandemic impact. We've relied heavily on Lori Nunnery at the CEDC for these projections. Current year, we're projecting compared to FY19, a 13% decrease in this year compared to FY19. Looking ahead to FY20, we've got another 17% decrease. So again, if you compare FY21 full year impact compared to the last full year impact of FY19, that's about a 34% decrease in hotel-motel tax from one year to the other. That broad category of tax revenues, and I didn't comment on every single account in there, but if you look at that categories of revenues, we were at $26.6 million in FY19. Projecting $24.9 million for FY20, and in FY21 we're projecting $23.4 million. So that would be about a 12% decrease from FY19. Just to give you some flavor for the impact.
So to recap that, you know, the major categories that we're seeing and monitoring closely are local sales tax and our state shared sales tax, as well as business tax, hotel-motel tax. Kind of peppered through there are some additional state shared revenues, gas taxes, and then even locally, we're seeing you know, increases in liquor and liquor taxes. So
right, I'm going to get to those here in just a second, but moving forward a little bit quicker, the broad category license and fees, we're projecting that's kind of some local license and fees. We're projecting a 1% decrease from FY19 levels for next year. Building and related permits, we're projecting a 20% decrease next year from FY19 levels. Federal and state grants vary quite often from year to year. There's a lot of detail there, but those are kind of grant driven. Paul, you mentioned some other state revenue allocations. State excise tax this year prior to the pandemic has actually been tracking well above FY19 levels. But with the pandemic, and the state has also extended the payment date on that, sort of where we've ended up on state excise tax for FY21 would be about a 12% decrease from this year, and compared to 19, it would be about a 17% decrease in excise taxes. On the state sales tax, not local sales tax, we've used the per capita numbers and some other numbers, projections from the state of Tennessee. And we're projecting next year about a 7% decrease in state sales tax from this year, and that would equate to about 6% less than we had in FY19. I mentioned, Paul, you mentioned gas taxes. There's 3 or 4 different categories of gas taxes, and we have used the state provided projections on those. And the FY21 number would equate to about a 12% decrease from both FY20 estimated as well as FY19. Just moving through the rest of this rather quickly.
Hey, Bobby,
Yeah.
you know, I think if we could get down to, and it may be those general fund, I know this has been distributed to the group, the general fund kind of impacts for, that way we can look at total dollars. I guess
Sure.
that's the first sheet of that. That gives somebody a reference point to look
Sure.
at what we're looking at as far as the difference in revenue from 19 to present.
Sure. So we provided a summary sheet here for the entire city, all the funds. It's a 1-page sheet. It's kind of busy. So, but you have that summary sheet, I guess, as a basis that you can look to. And then we've prepared, this was in the email as well. I think everyone will remember that in the FY21 budget, we are reclassifying some expense from the solid waste fund to the general fund. That's one thing that we're doing. In addition to that, we are rolling the Sportsplex fund, which has always been in a separate fund, an enterprise fund. We're rolling that into the general fund. So you have in the documents that we provided kind of a 1-page summary of the revenue and expense impact on the general fund next year from those decisions, and that's the net of that is about a $1.9 million draw on the general fund next year from those decisions to roll the Sportsplex fund into the general fund and to move the solid waste expense that needs to be moved to the general fund as well.
So I just draw everybody's attention. The document was sent out, budget FY21. And there's a spreadsheet. The first one is the general fund spreadsheet. And what Bobby's done is he's gone through every fund and put together our FY19 audited numbers, our estimated where we'd end at the end of FY20 and projections on FY21. And so I just want to bring everyone's attention. All the discussion that we just had, Bobby laid out the accumulation of the loss of revenue can be pretty well described in that top number on the first sheet from revenue where we were at in FY19 $74,860,000, and then we're estimating for this year to have a revenue of $70,745. And as you move into FY21, $70,962,000. So I just want to give everybody something to look at there. Bobby, we'll come back to the major categories and this reclassification, if that's okay.
Sure.
For Sandy's sake, I want to kind of stick on the agenda, and this may be a fault of mine in ordering it this way, but I think as we move forward into these discussions, it's important for us we've had some discussion, the mayor and Bobby and I, about setting up a budget hearing schedule moving forward for the council. And as you know, this group's responsible for recommending those processes. And as we've had to kind of regroup and regain plan moving forward, considering what's happened here, we've had some preliminary discussions about that schedule. And presently, what it's looking like, and Scott, stop me if I'm getting ahead of myself here, but we're having a meeting. I believe it's the 2nd of June. That's our regularly scheduled city council meeting. But what I'm recommending is that we go ahead and establish and send out some dates for the council to have some budget hearings. I know that we're getting that in order, but some of the preliminary dates we had looked at was June the 9th and June the 16th for 2 budget hearings and readings of the budget for the council to discuss. That's one of the objectives coming in, was to be able to establish those hearings back again, as those have been previously dropped the last year. And so I'd open up some discussion on that and have the mayor comment if he feels needed.
I think you're right on that. That's our plan, to have the budget hearings the 2 weeks following the council meeting, and we're going to get the information out to council by the end of this week, so they can start reviewing those budget documents to be prepared for June 9th.
And so what I, moving forward into next year, if we kind of rewind back a little bit, we had established, a working document budget calendar. And one of the things that I think we can do, I'm trying to always learn from issues that aren't executed, the way that we need them to be. One thing I think we can learn from this year and move forward is to really get on this budgeting process earlier in the next year, and to continue to stay on that and to fine tune that as we work through the next couple of years. I'm hopeful that, as I know we've been thrown a number of curveballs this year and have been trying to find our footing as far as the city's finance. We have a lot of new people on board in that regard. But I'm hopeful that next year we can start to work through this in a little bit more concise and planned way. Given the fact that we've been hit by a pandemic, that's pushed some things around, but I'm still hopeful that we can get all that information to the council and have them review it in sufficient amount of time and ask the questions that they need to ask. I'll stop talking and go ahead and move on to, unless there's any questions about that. Go ahead and move on. Bobby, can you run us through the capital budget? And I think you're on mute there.
Okay, here we go. Yeah, certainly. I'll be happy to take us through the capital budget.
Draw your attention to that. What the spreadsheet was sent out, capital budget collection summary. If anybody would like to follow along on that.
Paul, I would also recommend that in addition to looking at that summary, that they also look at the single page and for the capital outlay fund summary. That's important as well. The capital outlay fund is a little different from some of the other funds. It can be a little difficult to follow, primarily because in addition to kind of the capital budget summary that is submitted and reviewed and approved for a new budget year, in addition to those, most years there are carryover items that were approved in the prior year that have to be funded through the capital fund as well. And some of those oftentimes are grants, and some of those are not grants. So just to speak to the large spreadsheet by line item that you referred to begin with, Paul, where we've ended up at because of the revenue shortfalls and no plans to borrow any money for capital funding this year. We've essentially ended up in a situation where the anticipated state grant to local municipalities and counties that is expected to be in the final state budget for the city of Jackson, that's estimated to be $1,506,446. In addition, and what would need to happen between now and approval of the budget would be specific projects to be funded through that grant will need to be identified. In addition to that funding, we have budgeted in the capital outlay fund next year $113,000 worth of Improve Act gas tax revenues into the capital outlay fund to help us purchase some equipment to help with pothole repairs here in the city. And then, of course, we will have the Metro Drug Fund will be ultimately on this capital approval summary for you to consider as well. So that's sort of the new part of the proposed budget for next year. Let me stop there and see if there are any questions or you want to add anything to that, Paul, and then I want to speak to the little one-page capital outlay fund summary. So,
any questions about that? You know, just to refresh everybody, we had come into this year laying out, if you remember, our early work revolved around setting up a 5-year capital outlay plan. This has delayed that, at least in my view, this has delayed that 1 year due to the loss in revenue. I think we need to continue to stay on our plan. We have a lot of needs throughout the city that need to be addressed as far as capital is concerned. But this is a bump in the road that we're going to have to deal with. And you know, I think that if we can continue to monitor these revenues and over the next year and start to shift some of these operational savings as we come into the following years into some of this capital purchasing, we'll be in a better position ultimately.
thank you. So, Paul, I think it is important to take just a minute and talk about the capital outlay fund, the one-page summary for that fund, because you're going to see some different numbers on here that need to be explained. So if everyone could hopefully find that work paper, it's headed up capital outlay fund. It's a one-page summary. I'm going to focus my comments on the FY21 projected numbers. You'll see revenue is projected for the capital outlay fund next year of $6,611,040. What makes that up is the state grant of $1.5 million that we have commented on previously, the $113,000 for the Improve Act funding. But in addition to that, we have a grant for 45 South Bypass. That's 100% grant, no local match on that. The carryover amount for that next year is $4.1 million. And we also have a grant for the current work that's being done on FE Wright Drive. That grant does require a 20% match, but the carryover revenues, the 80% of that, that's funded by the grant for next year is $819,000. So that's the total projected capital fund revenue next year of $6.6 million. Any questions about that? Then conversely, if you look at the expenses that are projected for the capital outlay fund next year, included in that $8.5 million, again, would be the $1.5 million worth of projects from the state grant, the $113,000 for the pothole equipment. And then there are related grant expenses on the South Bypass as well as FE Wright Drive. that we've talked about. And then there's about $1.7 million worth of carryover items from this current year's budget that will have to be funded next year. And let me pause for just a second and define what a carryover item is. Technically, city appropriations lapse at June 30th, right? So you have those appropriations for 1 year and they do. The only case where they carry over is that if the city has encumbered those funds with an encumbrance or a purchase order or a contract that we've agreed to and committed to this year that will be paid for next year. So there are a certain number of items in our capital budget this year that fall into that category. And the aggregate amount of those is about $1.7 million. So we have to fund that in next year's budget. I will tell you the two largest items in the carryover amount currently would be the new fire truck that was in this year's budget. The delivery date on that is August. That's about $600,000. And then there continues to be a little bit of uncertainty as to exactly when the city court building project is going to be completed. And while we have tried to project payments that we know are going to happen between now and June 30th, there's about $700,000 of that total budget that looks like it might be a carryover for next year as well. So any questions about that? Thank you.
So what we're looking at, Bobby, is next year having an estimated ending fund balance of a little over $1 million in our capital outlay fund.
That's the projection now. I will tell you, this is still a very fluid process here, and yeah. But to answer your question, we are projecting at the end of next year $1 million, currently today anyway, $1 million fund balance left over in the capital outlay fund.
Okay. Any other questions from the group regarding the capital budget as it stands?
I had a quick question. This is Ron. I was just with everything that's going on, I know we can't really estimate it because it's too difficult at this time, but with demand being down on some of these capital outlay projects, is there an opportunity for us to take advantage of some possible savings in some of the costs for some of these items and projects, along with what we're having to deal with the shortfalls? Because we know that a lot of municipalities are not purchasing these things in the near future. And so with that demand being down, I would project that there would have to be a decrease at some point. Just a question.
That's a great question. I don't know that we've realized that demand being down yet. I think that the market, for us, as far as the municipality, I mean, you look at business and our sales tax revenue, we're 2 months behind. So for as municipality demand and supply goes, we're behind the rest of the market. So I don't think we've gotten to the point to realize those potential savings yet.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, though, that we'll need to watch as we proceed through this, and that demand continues to decrease as we go into this next fiscal year. That's another thing that we're continuing to monitor is state and national level, the potential additional grants that could come or funding from the federal level. We'll continue to monitor that, and that may make some changes to how we address capital or operating expenses as we enter into these final months and into the beginning of the next fiscal year. Any other questions on our capital budget? I'm going to move on to item D under old business, major category operational budget. We'll be going through this on a higher level of detail with the council in the coming weeks. But what I wanted Bobby to run through is just kind of that higher level, and I'm sure there will be some questions about some detail in this that hopefully he can answer, but I'm going to have him run through the operational budget as it stands right now.
Okay. Paul, I'm a little unclear on exactly how you would like for me to proceed. We do have a little one-page summary on each fund that I can speak to. I'm not sure if you're looking for what level of detail on where increases are, that type of thing.
All right. So if you look at it was a scanned document that was sent out to everybody, Doc 07. And if we look at that this is typically the level that we're, and Bobby, correct me if I'm wrong here. This is typically the level of detail that we include in our resolution or in the ordinance to adopt the budget. We've had some previous discussion about additional levels of detail, especially as you look at, you know, on the expense side, where we have them broken out in to 6 major categories within the general fund. But I guess where a point to start is to kind of look at the totals for our actuals from 19, our estimates from 20, and our projected budget or proposed budget for FY21. And as you kind of look down through there, some of this is broken out in the individual pages that Mr. Arnold's provided to us. But Bobby, if you could run us through on kind of a 30,000 foot level through where we're looking at budgeting for this coming fiscal year.
In terms of operating expenses?
Yes, in terms of operating expenses. So specifically, the general fund, you know, when I look through this, and one of the questions that comes to my mind is, you know, if we're consolidating the sportsplex or we're reclassifying the sportsplex and and some of these expenses that were previously included in health and sanitation, where are those in our budget? Where are those being absorbed at what major category level are those expenses being absorbed? Am I clear on that?
Yeah, a little bit. So yeah, clear as mud. So first off, I think the impact of what you're asking about, Paul, is summarized on another page here, right? So in terms of expenses next year, there's $1.8 million in the general fund expenses that was for the Sportsplex fund, which was previously in a separate fund. I'm pretty sure about this. It's in the total park facilities line item on the expense structure, for instance. And then from the solid waste fund, there's $1.1 million, $1.2 million worth of expenses. And when you look at this summary, it would be the animal care operation, which I think that's in, well, let's see. I think that's in, I'm really not sure where that is on this summary.
Public facilities, I believe.
Is it where?
Public facilities.
Public facilities, okay. Okay. Yeah, the reason it's a little confusing, and not to confuse you all even more, I apologize if I'm doing that, but on the solid waste transaction, Paul, if you all will remember the way those budget amendments were prepared, we have already reclassified that expense from the solid waste fund to the general fund for July through March of this fiscal year. And then we started charging it that way April 1, right? So you don't really see that as an increase from 20 to 21, if that makes sense. Where on the Sportsplex fund, that transaction is not taking place until the new budget year. So it will show up on the summary as an increase from FY20 to FY21.
Okay.
So I think we're looking at total public works would be the groundskeeping absorption of leaf pickup and street sweeping, and then facilities is the pickup of animal care, because animal care center is now assuming the management of animal control as well.
And the Sportsplex impact is pretty clear, but just again, the solid waste impact from year to year is not as clear on the summary schedule because we've affected FY20 projections to reflect that.
Okay. So then so as we move, if you could talk a little bit about, let me see, kind of our total difference, where we're looking at landing at the end of the year for this year, and where we're looking at landing at the end of next year, Bobby.
Okay, again, what I would recommend that we look at to accomplish that, Paul, would be the one-page summary for each fund. I think it's much clearer on there than it is on the summary for the entire city. Is that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah, it helps me to look at it in the broad scope, but then to break it down and look at it into the individual funds as well.
Right. So if it's okay, I'd like to go through the little one-page summary on each fund, particularly the major funds. So I'll be quick. So beginning with the general fund, if everyone can find that, we're in terms of operations in general fund this year, we're still hopeful that we have a basically break even to small surplus from operations for the general fund for this year. We should be receiving our May sales tax check later this week or early next week. And, we had made some projections about that number. So my comment about where our estimates are for this year are predicated on where those revenue projections come in at. But you can see the FY20 column for the general fund. We're projecting $721,000 surplus from operations. There are 3 likely transfers that are going to be required by the end of the year. 2 of these transfers you as a council have previously approved. This would be to write off the interfund payables and receivables between funds, $500,000 for solid waste, $400,000 from the Sportsplex. The third transfer that you see potentially is $101,000 that may be required for the debt service fund at June 30th. That amendment will be coming to you at the next meeting probably. So if all 3 of those transfers come to fruition as projected, we would have a small deficit for the general fund this year of $281,000 and would have an ending fund balance of $17.4 million. And if you look at the FY21 column for the general fund, currently we're sitting at a $4 million budgeted deficit for next year and a decrease in our fund balance from 17.4 million down to 13.3 million over the course of next year for the general fund. Okay. Next year would include the Sportsplex. So I'm going to forego any comments on the Sportsplex fund. And I'm going to pass on the small funds as well, the community development fund. I would want to comment quickly on the solid waste fund, if you can find that schedule. Remember that with the reclassification of that expense from the solid waste fund to the general fund in this fiscal year we're in right now, we're currently projecting $1 million surplus for the solid waste fund for FY20 from operations. And when we write off the liability due to the general fund, the anticipated ending fund balance for the solid waste fund at the end of this year is $1.3 million. We're budgeted for $1 million surplus in the solid waste fund next year, and a projected ending fund balance at the end of FY21 of $2.3 million.
I can touch real quick on that surplus. You look at, we got, potentially $2.3 million at the end of next year. Now we have 8 claw trucks that are roughly $600,000 a piece. I can tell you right now, one of those trucks is in the shop more than it's on the road. And so there will have to be some capital purchases out of that solid waste fund for those claw trucks to be able to continue providing service. That's what, instead of having to go to a capital outlay budget from our general fund to purchase those trucks, we can utilize what the original intent for that fund is, to fund the capital purchases and needs out of that fund as well.
Mayor, a question about that, since you brought it up. So if we're looking at purchasing additional capital to maintain our claw truck infrastructure, would it be safe to assume that as we're entering into the final contract year on our current solid waste pickup, that moving into the next contract year, we would be removing that scope of work that we're currently paying for going into the next contract? That the city would handle that on its own?
Yeah, the city will assume the bulky waste pickup and just have the contractor provide residential solid waste pickup.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So there's two or three other small funds there. No comment on those. The debt service fund, if you can find that one in your documents there. You can see there's a $300,000 transfer here. This is where there's a receivable in the debt service fund that's due from the Sportsplex fund. You've previously approved the budget amendment. That'll have to be recognized as well. So after those transactions, where you are projecting zero fund balance in the general and the debt service fund for FY20. In FY21, we have a balanced budget for the debt service fund of $11.4 million. We spoke to the capital outlay fund earlier, so that pretty much covers the major funds. Any questions? Thank you.
If there's no further questions on that, just one point, we've had some discussions about kind of formatting this better as we kind of enter into next year on getting all these expenses kind of at a departmental level on somewhat of a P&L sheet, so that we can see kind of how those expenses, and especially for those departments or facilities that generate revenue, so that we can kind of look at that. I think the way that we currently have our budget and those reports set up is we have the expenses in one large spreadsheet and the revenues in another large spreadsheet, and it can be difficult at times to align all those and get an understanding of that. So I just wanted to, for informational purposes, I think we're going to try to move towards that for some of these revenue producing facilities or departments in the coming year, and continue to improve upon that as we move forward.
And Paul, I'll speak to that. I've reached out to Bobby and Lauren from my office they're going to develop a committee to look at software platforms to be able to do that better. And so once they get through that, they'll at the start of the year, once we get through this budget and start the next fiscal year, they'll get together and start looking at that of a better way to provide that information.
So that moves us. We've talked about all this in our other discussions. So I'll move past item D2 the reclassification. We've seen that impact as Mr. Arnold's gone over those. And that brings us to our final item under old business E. Just wanted to see if we'd had any progress on establishing this process. I know that would be one of the things that we'd be looking at from this internal auditor that I'm hopeful for is one, communication of compliance, not only to municipal employees, but also, I know coming in as kind of a freshman council member, just understanding what I need to do and who I need and the processes that need to happen. MTAS provides a great resource for that, but to have somebody help onboard us as we kind of come on in the future, I think would be invaluable. I think Councilman Brooks and Pretty, if you guys, I guess you're still working on that. I know that the mayor's office was, the last we had discussed was about trying to get together on that.
Yeah, I think we talked about connecting with them on that. So we'll make sure to pick that up.
Okay.
Yeah, we had discussed it, but I hadn't received anything. So maybe that's something me and Ross need to kind of get working on.
Okay.
I do know that as we move forward, Mayor, I think surely the council, our level of support relative to our secretary and or administrative assistant with the additional, not necessarily additional duties, but with the microscope that we're looking at things now, that surely would be helpful and also even essential as we move forward.
Okay. So if you guys could touch base with the mayor's office, let's start to get that set up, and maybe we could have something drafted up for our next meeting. And Sandy, if you wouldn't mind being, I know you're listening, if you wouldn't mind being kind of the conduit for that, to set that meeting up, just a simple email to get that conversation going. Any other business today?
Paul, in that regard, and we look forward to working with Sandy on that, could you just, or someone just clarify what our charge is relative to that? We've discussed quite a bit.
Yeah, so just to recap
it
on
could
that.
be in the minutes.
Yeah, and I think it would be in our prior minutes. Just to recap on that, as we took on the role of the audit committee from the state's recommendation was to establish a process to confidentially report, suspected improper wasteful activity, and so we just need to set that up. And I see that potentially going in a number of ways. One is identifying the proper process to municipal employees and to government officials, and some program that identifies that, and then just maybe having a link on the website where if somebody that way they understand the proper hierarchy. You go to the mayor or you go to the comptroller.
Okay, and I would contemplate that would be some type of confidential reporting system or something. So,
yeah,
but Ross and I will discuss it.
Okay, yeah, the state provides that currently, and I think it's just a direction to get those individuals to that process.
To the right people. Okay.
Yeah, we got to have some steps. We want to be able to, if we can handle it and mitigate it and take care of it and remedy it at the local level, then
absolutely
it makes it easy. Right. But if that's not if there is an issue, then we all need to have the next step of making sure that everyone knows what the steps are, local level and then state level.
Okay.
Well, if there's no other, thank you, Ernest. And if there's no other discussion regarding any new business or business that's on the agenda, I would move to adjourn.
Second.
All of you, thank you very much. We're adjourned, and and just stay safe, and hope to be able to see you in person soon. We hopefully our next meeting, I think we may do a city council meeting in person coming up. We're still trying to fill that out, but
I'm nervous.
I just like, I know we all kind of have our reservations, but I'd like to see everybody and look everybody in the eyes at least sometime before the end of the summer. So let's be hopeful towards that.
We're going to, we're planning for June 2nd, council meeting in person. Everyone will be required to wear face coverings and no touching of each other. So you got to keep Councilman Buchanan and Councilman Cisco apart.
Have a good day.
Hey, thank you, Ernest.